Verse of the Kesa. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, bringing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, bring all creation. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, bring all creations. Gotcha of Atonement. All harmful karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All harmful karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All harmful karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. Fragrance of this incense invites the awakened mind to be present with us now. The fragrance of this incense fills our room, protects and guards our minds from wrong thinking. The fragrance of this incense unites us with precepts, concentration, and insight we offer for all beings. Homage to the Buddha. I seem to be. I have to turn that off. Light's weird in here tonight. I think it's because it's dark outside. That's a little bit better. Homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I go to the Buddha for guidance, and I shall become one with the Buddha. I resolve that I shall each day follow the way of life he laid down for us to walk, and awaken to his supreme wisdom. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I shall become one with the Dharma. The gates of Dharma are manifold. I vow to enter them all. The goal of wisdom is ever beyond. I shall attain it. I go to the Sangha for guidance. I shall become one with the Sangha. In the spirit of universal fellowship, and as a member of the Sangha, I pledge myself to strive for the enlightenment of all beings. Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the skies and downward to the depths, outward and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, sitting or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into the world of suffering. Metta prayer. May I be happy and well. May no harm come to me. May I learn compassion. May all my friends, family, and those I love be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those troubled in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those who have hurt me in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those I have hurt in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all my enemies be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all living beings be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. So, for the meditation tonight, I want to go through all four of the Brahma Viharas. I haven't done that in a really long time. I haven't done it since we started meeting online. So I'm not going to give you a lot of structure, but the meditation itself is fairly structured. So we'll do this, and then we can talk about it later if you have questions about it. Take several deep breaths. Let your belly be nice and soft so your lungs can fill and empty completely. No need to breathe unnaturally deep. Just really fill your lungs and empty them. And as you breathe out, let go of any tension, any tightness, anything you're clinging to. Just let that go for now. And let your breath just settle into a comfortable rhythm. And for this one, the best touching point, the best place to feel the breath is at the center of your chest. You don't have to breathe any special way, but breathing in, be aware. Breathing out, be aware. And as you exhale, let this phrase just ride silently on your breath. May I be happy. May I be free from animosity. And let go of any form of ill will that's present in your heart now. Any that arises as we do this, just let it pass. May I be free from stress and affliction. And just remember that anything that comes into your awareness, you can accept it, let it be, or you can release it, let it go. There's no need to cling to anything, no need to push anything away. Accept, release. May I look after myself with ease. So guarding the mind calmly and compassionately, being aware of how the mind is moving, bring it back to your object of meditation, bringing it back to a place of stillness. Looking after myself with ease. And then if there's someone in your life that you'd like to extend a wish for happiness to, a loved one or a friend or someone that you know needs friendship, just go ahead and send them that thought. May they be happy. And extend that same idea to someone else. So you can think about yourself and your friend or loved one being together, and sort of let that wish for happiness broaden, really so that your practice is becoming more expansive, including other people. So is there someone you've been shutting out? Maybe someone that bugs you, or that you don't understand. And if you feel up to it, if you'd like, just expand this wish for happiness to include them. May they be happy. So we're going to move on from metta to karuna, compassion. We're going to be soft with this today. And we're going to open up to the compassion that we feel, and recognizing that true compassion is really the mind of enlightenment. Because true liberation, true freedom from suffering, is spiritual freedom. We all experience birth and death and illness and old age and separations from people and things we love and circumstances we don't like. That's universal. If we want to be free from the suffering associated with that, and ultimately to transcend all of that, we need to awaken. So begin with the idea, may I be free from suffering. And if there's someone you know that's suffering, wish for this same spiritual freedom for them. True compassion doesn't go around solving problems. True compassion encourages and supports spiritual freedom. May they be free from suffering. And if you'd like, include the person that you've been closed off to. Open up to them, hoping that, wishing that they become free from suffering. move on from compassion to mudita, joy in others' good fortune and in your own good fortune. So it's like gratitude, only a lot better because you can have gratitude on behalf of everyone. So it can be helpful. Think of some things that you have that you're grateful for, some forms of good fortune that you appreciate and enjoy. So good fortune is a result of good karma, good actions. The traditional verse for this is, may I keep the good fortune obtained by me. In other words, may I keep the good fortune I have by doing good things, by cultivating good karma and experiencing good fortune as a result, good results. You do a good thing, you get a good result. So appreciate the results of your good actions. May I appreciate my good fortune. And this loved one or friend that you've been thinking about, appreciate their good fortune too. Maybe they're having a tough time, but they have you for a friend, wishing them well. That's good fortune. They live in the world where they're supported in a lot of different ways, and where the Dharma is available to them. And maybe other things that you know about too. May they appreciate the good fortune that they have obtained. If you feel up to it, do that for the person that you've been closed off to also. May they appreciate the good fortune they have obtained. Maybe they'll do good things and get more good results. And finally, upeka, equanimity. Your birth and death and illness and old age is a consequence of your birth as a human being. We can't really control our circumstances. Even our very body is not ourself. But we own our actions. I'm the owner of my karma, the heir to my karma. My actions. Born of karma, related to all beings by karma. Born from my actions, but interdependent with everything. Whatever actions I do, good or evil, I will inherit the results. So think about your loved one, a friend, and the person you're having trouble with. Both are the owners of their karma, heirs to their karma, born of karma, related by karma, supported by their actions, and whatever they do, good or evil, they'll inherit the results. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings enjoy the results of their good actions. All beings are the owners of their karma. Whatever they do, good or evil, they'll inherit the results. So just sit for a moment with your attention at the center of your chest. Feel yourself balanced and at ease. So I'm going to talk tonight about compassion. First, a couple of announcement-y things. So I think I mentioned before, maybe Sunday, that White Sands is talking about reopening services the first Sunday in July. And the church in DeLand is not going to start having their services probably for the rest of this year. But they are going to reopen their meeting room so we can meet there. So I'm looking forward to that. I know some of you are looking forward to that. The problem with it, though, is that there are people who are not able to come to those meetings, either because of distance or because of they have compromised immune systems or whatever, and they need to be extra careful about infections. So, want to try to figure out a way that we can live stream those Wednesday night meetings. And I'm talking to White Sands about hopefully being able to live stream the Sunday morning meetings. So the problem at the UU church is that they don't have internet in the church. So if you have want to propose a solution to that, let me know. Email me. Let's not try to talk about it here, but email me and let's talk about what maybe we could do. I know there's ways of turning your phone into a Wi-Fi hotspot and stuff. I don't know how to do it, but I know it can be done. And we could always offer to install internet service at the church, but I think that's very expensive. So that would be probably the best solution, but I think that's costly. So anyway, if you have any thoughts on that, let me know, because I know that that's going to be important to some people. So anyway, compassion. So one time when the Buddha was staying at Jeta's Grove, which was one of the monasteries near Rajgir. A monk came along and asked for instruction so that he could leave the monastery and go out to pass along the teachings to others. And this was what monks did. You know, they would spend some time at a monastery where the Buddha was, or where there were some other advanced monks, and they'd practice and they'd learn some stuff. And then, you know, that's kind of how the religion spread, is that people would go off and they would talk about what they'd learned. And so the Buddha sat down with him and spent some time talking to him, to kind of see where he was at, what he knew, and what he needed to know. And then he said, "So where are you going to go live?" And the monk said he was going to go to this region up north. And the Buddha said, "Oh, up north. Those northern people are fierce. What if they insult you and ridicule you? What will you say?" And he said, "Well, if they insult and ridicule me, I will think these people are civilized, very civilized, and that they don't hit me with their fists." The Buddha said, "Well, okay, so what if they hit you with their fists?" And the monk said, "Well, I will think these people are very civilized. They don't throw dirt clods at me." So you can see where this is headed, right? Yeah, I'm sure you have a sense of where this is going already. And so the Buddha says, "Well, what if they throw clods of dirt at you?" And he says, "Well, these people are very civilized. They don't hit me with sticks." And it goes on like this for a while, through sticks and stones and knives and saws and all kinds of horrible things that, the Buddha says, "Well, what if they do this?" And finally the Buddha says, "Okay, you can go." And sure enough, this monk not only ended up with 1,000 followers at this region to the north that he went to, but he became fully enlightened himself. So the Buddha was testing this monk's compassion. He wanted to make sure that he was prepared to be compassionate, to practice compassion, even if his own well-being and security was threatened by people who were deliberately and willfully not compassionate. So once you start studying Buddhism, the subject of compassion comes up quite a bit. It's not as easy a subject as it may seem on the surface. And when you really delve into it as a practice, you often find misunderstanding and even resistance on the part of some people. So I wanted us to spend some time considering compassion. Like, what is it? Why is it important? How do you get it? What do you do with it once you have it? Those kinds of things. So look, this is important. There are people out there, and I've talked to a number of them in the last few weeks, looking after other people. The medical professionals who are dealing with, in some cases, maybe not so bad right around where we are, but I meet with some people online and stuff that we've really been through some pretty tough times, and taking care of other people, and university administrators and people like that who really live very compassionate lives, and who, when I say, start talking about this, you can kind of see their eyes glaze over. I mean, a lot of people are dealing with compassion fatigue right now. So if you're one of those people, you are free to ignore about 2/3 of what I say tonight. I'm serious, right? You may need it later, so don't tune me out completely. But if you're overwhelmed by compassion right now, you need to be but you need to be practicing self-compassion, self-care, anyway. You often hear that compassion is a cornerstone of Buddhist practice, and it's true. And it's a common subject in books on Buddhism. The Dalai Lama has, said rather famously, my religion is compassion. But when you start looking at the core teachings the Buddha gave, you really don't find a lot of direct mentions of it from him. It's not one of the 7 factors of enlightenment. It's not one of the paramitas, and so on. But compassion touches all of those things in one way or another. And so the principle and practice of compassion is like the guiding force in Buddhist ethics. It's one of the 3 virtues said to characterize the Buddha himself. When we do the guardian meditations, You meditate on wisdom, compassion, and purity of mind. So it's almost impossible to consider the ultimate spiritual goal of Buddhism, enlightenment, without talking about compassion. And I think it would be impossible to attain anything resembling true enlightenment without first developing compassion. So when the Buddha did talk directly about it, it was often in the larger context, when he was telling people what states of mind to develop, which is why we did that particular meditation. Compassion is one of 4. And he pointed out that the causes of stress and suffering are 3 poisons: greed, animosity, and delusion. And so he was instructing people to transcend those states, and by encouraging them to develop the Brahmaviharas, the divine abodes. So compassion is the second of those. It's very closely related to the first, metta, which is goodwill. We chanted the Metta Sutra, or we read the Metta Sutra together earlier. And so basically metta is the state of wanting others to be happy. And compassion is what happens when a mind that is imbued with goodwill encounters someone who's suffering. It's not just a state of mind. It's a virtue that uproots the desire to cause harm. It makes you sensitive to the sufferings of others, so you don't want to do anything to increase their suffering, and you want to help lessen it. There's a difference between compassion and pity. If you pity somebody, you're setting yourself above them as if you're somehow better or more fortunate. But with compassion, you're aware of your own pain, and you recognize that pain in others. And you recognize the pain of others in your own pain. So we see ourselves really in the context of interdependence. And in seeing the stress within ourselves, we discover this imperative to be kind and compassionate to others. And that's not just a Buddhist thing. You see compassion reflected in things like the Charter for Compassion, which was the brainchild of Karen Armstrong, who was a former Catholic nun, and an author of books on comparative religion. And she points out that the principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious traditions. It's embodied in the Golden Rule, where it says to treat others as we wish to be treated. And so, the Charter of Compassion says we should work to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures, to dethrone ourselves from the center of the world, and honor the sanctity of everyone, treating everyone with justice, equity, and respect. And so that's true compassion. Honoring everyone with justice, equity, and respect. That doesn't have anything to do with pitying someone, does it? Because if you're pitying someone, you're not honoring them, right? So why is this important? And why? And do we need to have it for everyone? Or if so, why? Right. So we used to have this guy at the Buddhist group in Tomoka Correctional Institution. An inmate, I'm going to call him Franklin, that's not his real name, but he was doing time for drug dealing and related charges and that sort of thing. And he has since been released, thank goodness, as far as I know, is doing well. But at the time, he was kind of a difficult guy. He was really opinionated and argumentative and could be very arrogant. And one day, as our meeting was wrapping up, another inmate came up to me and he was talking to me about a couple of things, and then he gestured over toward Franklin and he said, Sensei, I know I'm supposed to develop compassion, but I really do I really have to have compassion for that guy? Well, this is a good question. Having compassion for difficult people is difficult. It's relatively easy to have compassion for people that we like. But, you can have compassion for victims of crime, but not for criminals, right? We could have compassion for kids who get bullied, but not for the bullies, and so on. So what could possibly be wrong with that? Well, I looked at him, and he was clearly angry. I don't remember what had happened, but the guy had been his usual self, and so his anger was understandable. And I said, no, you don't have to have compassion for him. You don't have to do anything. But do you want peace of mind? And that's really as far as I had to go with it, because he recognized right away that his anger at Franklin was not Franklin's fault. It was a product of his own mental activity. So this is why compassion is important. It helps us. It's an antidote to one of the things that leads to our spiritual destruction, to ill will. Ajahn Mun was a famous Southeast Asian monk, and he became an arahant. A very interesting autobiography. One of those. If you're interested in those kinds of things, I think I've got several copies of it that were given to me at one point. So if you're local, I'll loan you a copy. And if you're not local, I'm not sure how to get it. But anyway, he was a very famous monk, and one day somebody asked him for a victory protection. And this is a thing that Theravada monks get. They chant stuff, blessings and things like that. And so this person wanted a victory protection. And Ajahn Mun said, okay, and then he thought for a minute, and he said, conquer anger with non-anger. That was his victory protection. Conquer anger with non-anger. He said, for anyone hoping to achieve victory, that idea is the most important teaching in practice. All beings share a common desire for happiness and a dislike for stress and suffering, and the most effective deterrents to hatred or love and kindness. So if you want to protect yourself from misery, then don't hate. And so that's the kind of the Buddhist answer to the question, why is compassion important? It's the solvent that dissolves anger's hold on our consciousness. And so to practice compassion is to move closer to spiritual freedom. But that's not as easy as just not being mad. It requires understanding. So for someone like that inmate that I was talking about, Franklin, the annoying behavior is really the form that the suffering takes. And so once you recognize that, you get a little closer to understanding your own suffering and then how you deal with it. Albert Ellis, who is one of my mentors, despite he got interested in Buddhism very later in life, in his 90s. His fifth wife, I think it was, took him to see the Dalai Lama speak, and he liked what he heard. But he was very much a proponent of practicing compassion. He called it unconditional other acceptance, right? So you accept others without putting conditions on that. Doesn't mean you have to like them. Doesn't mean you have to like everything you do, but you accept them as human beings living out their karma unconditionally. And he pointed out that accepting ourselves unconditionally, despite our imperfections, is important to our own psychological well-being. So we can rate our actions as undesirable or unskillful and try to improve them, but we should do that without rating ourselves as bad. And in the same way, we can recognize that someone else's behavior might be unskillful or harmful, and we can even take steps to prevent it or change it, but still accept the person unconditionally. You hear this in Christian circles all the time, condemn the sinner, but condemn the sin, but not the sinner, right? So, in other words, you can love the person even though you don't love what they do. So there's no true compassion without equanimity and acceptance. You're not practicing compassion if you want one person to be free from suffering and you enjoy watching someone else suffer, right? That degree of acceptance can seem like a tall order, but it's achievable to some extent. I used to look up inmates on the Department of Corrections database to see what their background was. I used to think maybe that was going to help me deal with them sometime. And then I would almost always end up being sorry that I had done it, because some of these guys had done some pretty terrible things. And I think, wow, how am I going to look at that guy now that I know what he's done? But then you see him again and you realize that he's trying to live better. He's trying to get free from the patterns of thinking that got him sent to prison. And when you're just relating as a human being who's trying to become freed from suffering, talking to another human being who's tried to become freed from suffering, then those things that have happened in the past that we identify one another with really don't matter all that much. So Yeah, by the way, when I looked up Franklin to see why he was in prison, which I did before I talked about him the first time in a Dharma talk, I was relieved to learn that his rap sheet didn't have anything much worse than armed robbery in it. It's kind of weird when you catch yourself going, "Oh, whew, thank goodness he's just a drug dealer and armed robber," right? Because there are much worse things. Um, so, unfortunately, being compassionate is not just a matter of deciding one day, well, now I'm going to be compassionate. It has to be developed through practice. And so there are meditation techniques like what we did earlier that can help with that. But it's important to remember that compassion is not just a state of mind, it's a way you live your life. The Buddha didn't start off teaching people how to meditate on compassion. Instead, he taught compassionate action through a combination of generosity and restraint. So the first thing you can do if you want to cultivate compassion is to be generous toward people that you can help. That doesn't mean going around writing checks to everybody you can, although if you have that, the wherewithal to do that, more power to you. But be generous with your time and generous with your attention and things like that. And when you do that, you're expressing your desire for the recipient to have more happiness and fewer difficulties. And then when you become a Buddhist officially, we take precepts, which are vows to restrain our actions so that they're more skillful. Meditation restrains the mind. We can also restrain our actions of body. So when we meditate, we keep our mental actions from following every impulse that comes along. And we can do the same thing with our body. We can train ourselves not to follow every impulse that comes along. And so, you refrain from causing harm because it's a compassionate way to live. And when you do that, you sort of lead with the body that way by behaving in a compassionate way toward others. Then the mind is learning that compassion is okay. And you actually end up feeling better and causing a lot less harm for yourself and others. So when you think, well, why do I have compassion for difficult people in my life? Well, you don't have to feel a special way. Start out just by refraining from causing them physical harm. And then try not to cause harm to your own mind by cultivating angry thoughts, and, plotting your revenge and that kind of stuff. So let's say that you decide to practice compassion and you want to develop more of it. Then what do you do with it? For a lot of people, it turns into things like kindness towards troublesome people. For some, it can become a form of activism. Ironically, though, working with compassion for one person or group can lead to the arising of anger for another person or group. So you have to be careful about that. Think about whatever activism that you do. Think of it as a gift for the people on behalf of whom you're acting. Don't think of it as punishment for the people you're acting against. And that's always a temptation, especially you see some of the things that we've seen in the last few weeks, 75-year-old men getting pushed down and stuff like that, and elderly women being pushed to the ground and then cursed at, and that kind of stuff. Sure, you want to lash out. I mean, that's a normal human feeling, right? To be angry about something like that. But the activism really should be going at the root of the problem, which is greed, hatred, and delusion. So, and if you can't start with your own greed, hatred, and delusion, what are you going to do with somebody else's, right? So, so think about ways that you can give compassionate actions toward others. So, the more we encourage the practice of compassion, the more our world benefits from it. Compassion really has the power to break down the boundaries between people when we can recognize that the forms that our own suffering takes and how it comes out sometimes in unskillful ways. So we can recognize that in ourselves. We can recognize it in others. It can help us begin to break down some of the political and ideological boundaries. So when he gave that victory protection, conquer anger with non-anger, Ajahn Mun was pointing out that anger can destroy a society. But as long as living beings can manage to have love and kindness in their hearts, there's always a chance that their desire for happiness will be fulfilled. Without that, we might have all the material comforts in the world, but our lives will still be devoid of genuine peace and happiness if we can't have compassion and understanding. So I want to take just a minute to talk about people who are feeling compassion fatigue, feeling overwhelmed by this. You know, there's such a thing as self-compassion, meaning recognize your suffering. Don't be too hard on yourself. You know, set aside some time for yourself to take care of yourself and give yourself what you need. And yeah, you know, there's people who are going to hear that and they're going to be very selfish and lazy. But the people that I'm talking about, and this includes some of you I know because I've talked to some of them about some of it. If you really, you know, compassion fatigue is a real thing. And the solution to it, you don't want to become numb, right? So the way to not become numb is to make sure that you take care of yourself. You start by saying, may I be free from suffering. And remember that true freedom from suffering is going to be a result of spiritual liberation, not going to be a result of changing your circumstances. It's the same with the other people that you deal with. When I was in India, you know, you see these poor people who, you know, live on the streets, and it's their lot in life. They're going to be living on the streets as beggars forever because that's what they are, and living on handouts and you know, terrible conditions. And you can't solve all their problems. You know, you even a few of them. You know, but what you can do is you can become awakened. You can become enlightened for the benefit of others, right? So that doesn't mean turn your back on anyone. It doesn't mean that you don't pay attention to practical, real life suffering when you encounter it. But you know, the more of us can set our hearts on awakening, the kinder a world we're going to live in. So we're almost out of time. Let me see what kind of questions that you have. I seem to have run on a bit tonight. But I also don't see any questions. There's not a lot of you watching tonight. I wonder if there was a technical issue that I wasn't aware of. Well, I hope not. At any rate, so don't forget that tomorrow night we meet on Zoom. If you don't have that information, you can email me and I'll tell you how to get there. And thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. So, do the dedication. Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, existing right here now, and offering flowers, candles, and incense, hearing the Dharma and training the mind. Great merit is attained. We dedicate this merit to the great Master Shakyamuni Buddha, the all-pervading and everlasting three treasures, 16 guardians and all protectors of the Dharma and their relations throughout space and time, to all ancestors of the Sangha and all beings in the Dharma world. May penetrating light dispel the darkness of ignorance. Let all karma be resolved in the mind, flower bloom in eternal spring. May the Dharma body maintain strength and health, and years of life be lengthened for all teachers of this Sangha. May their vows be fully realized, and may they live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma. We pray for all those suffering from violence and those who grieve for them, for those living in oppression, for all who are in prison who should be free, for all refugees from violence, hunger, and catastrophes, man-made or natural. We pray for the health and well-being of those suffering from diseases of body, mind, or spirit, all those working toward the healing of those afflictions. We pray for those suffering from COVID-19 and those working to protect and treat them, and to those grieving for those lost to this pandemic. May they all be serene through all their troubles, and may we realize the enlightened way together. Sabbe sata sadahantu avera sukha jivino kutam punya phalam maham sabbe bhagi bhavantu te. May all beings always live happily, free from animosity. May all share in the blessings that spring from the good we have done. Thank you. Have a good evening.